welcome to my channel. How are you? My name's Jasmine, and this week I'm going to be reviewing some of Taylor Swift's favorite books. For anyone who knows me, I am a huge Taylor Swift fan. Do I think it's a personality trait? No. But does it somewhat define me? Yeah, probably. I think that's fair. Have I also shamelessly copied this video idea from book YouTubers I like? Yeah, definitely. But I will link their videos in the description below. The first book I wanted to review is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I don't know how to say her second name, so sorry. For anyone who doesn't know, Rebecca is a psychological thriller, and it's about this young woman who marries an older man who is a widower. She marries him. As she sort of progresses into the marriage, she slowly begins to feel the presence of his previous wife, Rebecca. And Rebecca's presence is sort of looming throughout the whole book, even though she's dead. And in terms of how it inspired Taylor Swift with her songwriting, she has a song called Tolerate It on her album Evermore. She said in an interview, when I was reading Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, I was thinking, wow, her husband just tolerates her. She's doing all these things and she's trying so hard. She's trying to impress him and he's just tolerating her the whole time. And that actually she'd felt a similar way herself, which is super sad. But I agree. I mean, anyone who's read this book, like, you know, the main protagonist, and we never find out her name, but she is trying so freaking hard to please her husband, all the staff that are working in the house, Mrs. Danvers, who's this creepy housekeeper lady who's just like never happy. If I was to sum up this book, I would say that it's anxiety inducing. And not just because there's a sort of psychological thriller aspect of having the looming presence of Rebecca and what happened to her. That's interesting. But the fact that you are thrown in the perspective of the main character and you see all her thoughts about herself, about the other people in her life, it's just like a really intense book to read because the main character, for a lot of the book, she has a lot of self-hatred and she automatically assumes that everyone around her hates her and thinks that she is inadequate. So it's like a stressful book for a multitude of reasons, and the actual character of Rebecca, who is this spiritual presence in the book, I think she's a pretty interesting character. I mean, and spoiler alert, she is sort of thought of by everyone in the book as this perfect woman who was beautiful, kind, funny, all that. And then as you're reading the book, you get the sense that Rebecca was not who everyone thought she was. She had this more manipulative, darker side of her personality. And one thing I thought was so interesting is that the author, Daphne du Maurier, she was actually representing both sides of herself. One half of herself was the protagonist of the book, who starts off more innocent and meek and is struggling to find her voice. And then the other half of the author was represented by Rebecca, who was this more charming, outgoing, but also manipulative and self-absorbed woman. I thought this book was so well crafted, not just in terms of the plot, but also in terms of the language. There's definitely a balance between it being poetic, but also it's very engaging, the dialogue and the descriptions. It never gets boring, other than maybe like the last fifth of the book. They're trying to figure out what happened to Rebecca, and I mean, it's interesting, but it like drags on a little bit towards the end. Oh yeah, and another thing I kind of didn't like about this book is that the main character's love interest is her husband, Max, or Maxim, Maxie, I don't know, I don't care. I mean, he's meant to be mysterious and charming, but he comes across more as just patronizing, and also, again, spoiler alert, he literally kills his wife, his previous wife, Rebecca. And his current wife, the protagonist of the novel, is like, oh, cool, you killed Rebecca, that's fine. I'm chill, now I know you love me for real, and that you never loved her. And that's all she's concerned about, which, if my husband told me that he'd killed his previous wife, I might be a little concerned, you know? Like, what if he wants to do the same thing to me? Also, the fact that he's a murderer, maybe he should go to jail. But other than that, I definitely recommend this book. So, yeah, I liked Rebecca. I probably won't watch the Netflix film because not really Armie Hammer fan, but definitely recommend this book. The next book I wanted to review is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I think my favorite genre of artists or musicians are ones that reference The Great Gatsby in their songs, like Taylor Swift and Lorde. I think Greenlight is a reference to The Great Gatsby. I might be wrong. Also, there's another artist I love called Ella Jane, and she wrote a whole freaking song about this book. I love that song. Yeah, so I think that should be its own specific genre. In terms of Taylor's reference and inspiration when it comes to this book, she actually referenced it in a song called This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things, when she says, feeling so Gatsby for that whole year, yeah. And again, like Rebecca, in terms of the writing style, it's super poetic. And yeah, it's just really beautifully written. Again, it's actually one of those books that they make you read that is good and it's not boring like The Scarlet Letter, no offense. And in terms of the plot of The Great Gatsby, it's basically about this guy who's called Nick Carraway, and he meets Jay Gatsby, who's this sort of mysterious, elusive figure who is super rich and has all these massive parties for everyone. And it's set in the Roaring 20s, which, like, come on, that's like, seems like a fun period of time to participate in before, like, the Wall Street crash and everything kind of went down the pan. And Gatsby, basically, the thing that defines him and drives him and all of his decisions is his love for Daisy Buchanan. It's why he built up his wealth, it's why he has all these parties, and now he hopes that with his big house and his economic status and all that stuff, he'll be the perfect man for Daisy, which kind of doesn't really work out too well for him, spoiler alert. And basically he puts Daisy on this big pedestal. He has this massively idealized version of who she is. Weirdly enough, like, obviously he has this perfect image of who Daisy is, but through reading the book you get the sense that Daisy is more selfish and flawed, like a normal person would be, and actually putting her on this pedestal is kind of a reductive image of who she is. She's more complex than that, and whatever they have together, whatever love they might have, is ultimately doomed. And I think maybe one of the reasons why this could be an inspiring book for Taylor and other songwriters is that it's super poetic. The imagery is beautiful, and he has a lot of just really ornate metaphors that he uses and imagery throughout the book. And I think Fitzgerald really creates these complex characters, Gatsby especially, because he sort of is deluded if he thinks that, he can just make himself into the man that Daisy is, will be desperate to be with. But at the same time, you definitely feel sympathetic to him as a reader because of the efforts he goes to woo Daisy when ultimately his efforts are doomed. Next up, I wanted to talk about Wordsworth's poetry. Taylor basically refers to William Wordsworth in her song The Lakes, which, if you've listened to it, it's a deluxe track off of Folklore, and it's one of my favourite Taylor songs because it's heavily inspired by romantic poets and like the romantic imagery through its focus on nature, the sublime and the individual and the self and all that kind of stuff. She says in her song The Lakes, "I've come too far to watch some name-dropping sleaze tell me what are my Wordsworth." And that's like a pun for Wordsworth, the poet, and someone, to tell her what the value of her words are, which is pretty cool. Finally, I wanted to talk about normal people. Basically, the book is about two characters, Marianne and Connell, and as a reader, you get to see their journey from when they are in school to when they've grown up a bit and they are in university. I felt like the narrative style was pretty different to a lot of the literary fiction I was reading at the time. The narrative voice feels quite cold and distant, and it shows the shifting dynamics of their romantic relationship and friendship. And I think that Sally Rooney is also so good at showing the kind of internal monologues of these two characters and their perspectives. And as a reader, we get a really intense look at what their insecurities are and how their trauma and experiences have shaped them. And it's kind of sad because you can see in certain moments in the book where I'm thinking of one where Connell's own mental health and struggles with mental health cause him to push Marianne away because he's unable to sort of cope with mental health and being in the relationship and opening up about his mental health. In terms of what Taylor said about normal people, I honestly don't know. I just looked up at a website and apparently she told a fan that she likes normal people. So we're just gonna go on that, of course, that must be 100% the truth. I think it'd be really fun if Taylor wrote a song about Connell and Marianne. I think that should be on the next album. I'm sure the next album is coming soon. I mean, come on. She literally released 3 albums within the last year. So another one, surely. Come on. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you guys like the video, then like, comment, subscribe. Yeah, leave a comment if you agree with my opinions or if you have any other book recommendations, because that would be super useful for me. I really need some. Thanks. Bye.